This February 19th, 2025 special meeting of the Board of Directors of the Santa Monica Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency is called to order. At this time, I'd like to ask all citizens to rise if you are able to join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chair Natoli. I will take a roll call. Director Welsh.
Here.
Director Wynn.
Here.
Director Singletary.
Here.
Vice Chair Wang.
Here.
And Chair Natoli.
Here.
Great, we have a quorum and we can continue with the meeting. Item number 4.
Item number 4, do any of the directors have any ex parte communications to disclose? Hearing none, I want to move on to the rules of conduct. The board will only entertain comments that are civil. Anyone who becomes disruptive, disrespectful, repetitive, does not remain on topic, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting will be asked to sit down and given a warning by the chair of the board, or if attending virtually, will be muted. The individual will be asked to leave by the chair of the board if they continue with the disruptive conduct for Government Code Section 54957.95. No warning is required if the individual is using force or threatening to use force against someone. Moving on to item 5, the consent items. This is the approval of minutes from our 15 January 2025 meeting. Are there any comments, corrections, changes to the minutes?
I just have a note, Chair Natoli, that we neglected to also agendize the meeting minutes from October, so we will need to do that for the next meeting.
All right.
Sorry, just one correction on the minutes. Is my spelling of my name under item line number 3. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will entertain a motion to approve the consent items.
I'll move. Seconded.
Seconded by Director Hume. And will you call the roll?
I will. Director Welch.
Yes.
Director Witt.
Yes.
Director Singletary.
Yes.
Vice Chair Wang.
Yes.
Chair Natoli.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you. Item 6 is a public forum, which allows members of the public to speak on any item not on the agenda, but which is in the purview of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Do we have anyone signed up?
We do, yes. We have Ms. Patricia McPherson. Ms. McPherson, I'm going to promote you and give you 3 minutes. And you may unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, Patricia McPherson. Good morning, everyone. I just have a couple of things that I wanted to find out from you and that are perhaps best placed public comment. And that is, number one, who's at this meeting again? I believe it's 9:03. This meeting start. I thought at 9 o'clock, and we're on item 6 already. So maybe I'm wrong, but also who's here. And I'm also looking for the water board contact that this group is in contact with from the water board regarding the issues of this group. And I also wanted to let you know that we do have issues that have come up that have been actually for more than a year, actually, that there is a saltwater intrusion that has been going unabated into Ballona wetlands through one of the gates that has been broken, and it is still not fixed. So I just wanted to raise that with your attention, and we are now finally in contact with the LA County Flood Control District regarding that. And CDFW does not own or operate the channel as they have stated. And this is kind of an example that demonstrates that They don't, because they were informed about this at least a year ago, and nothing has occurred to fix this saltwater intrusion. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson.
Do we
We don't
have
have
anyone?
any other speakers.
All right, very well. Let me just address a couple of things from Ms. McPherson. I start meetings on time as much as possible, so I did start today at 9 o'clock, and the first 5 items were the call to order and the pledge, roll call, disclosure of ex parte communications. There were none. I read the rules of conduct, and then consent items where we approved minutes. So items 1 through 5 were not substantive items that would take much time. So that's why probably at 9:03, we were already on item 6. And as for water board contact, I think Dr. Weinberger, do you have a name or?
And
Mr. Wang,
we
director?
spoke with Jung Hee, forgot her last name. I think it was Kim at the regional board regarding dewatering data, them publishing that. That was the person at regional board.
That's the information we have for you at this time, Ms. McPherson, and thank you for the information about the broken gate at the Bayona wetlands. All right,
Ms. McPherson has requested to speak again, so. Ms. McPherson, you have 1 minute remaining on your time, so it's unorthodox for me to allow you to speak again. I will allow you that 1 minute, and if you could please wrap up any comments that you have during public forum in this 1 minute. Go ahead.
I don't have anything else. I just did not get the name from the water board person. It sounded like Jong Kim. Could you spell the name, please?
Jung Hee, JEONG HEE. I think the last name is Kim, KIM.
Kim is last name, and it's
Correct.
JEONG -HEE. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. Do you know what division he's in, or she?
I do not.
You can consult the website. The staff of the water board is on the website.
Well, I realize I can do that. I was just hoping that I could get this from whoever is from this group that is in contact with.
I understand, but you can email
I
them
get it.
through the website.
Thank you. Thank you.
do we have any other speakers?
We do not.
Moving on to our informational items. Section 7A, quarterly update on new well permit applications. Dr. Weinberger.
Yeah, so this is a new item that'll be recurring at every meeting. It was at the request of the board in the October meeting. Just to get an update on whether or not there have been any well permit applications in the Santa Monica subbasin. As of this meeting, the County of Los Angeles, it's the well permitting agency, has not notified the GSA secretary of any well permit applications within the Santa Monica subbasin since that October 16th meeting. So that's no new well permit applications in the subbasin over this quarter, a little over a quarter.
Very well, thank you, Dr. Weinberger. Is there any discussion by the board? Thank you. Is there any public comment on this?
We do not have any public comment.
Thank you. This is a receive and email item. So we're moving on to item 7B, the discussion of well permitting coordination efforts between the Groundwater Sustainability Agency and the County of Los Angeles. Dr. Weinberger.
Yeah, and again, you'll see a thread through this. Most of these were requested as informational items at the October 16th meeting, and there are sort of 2 portions to this discussion on well permitting coordination that tie in to the governor's executive orders that have been rescinded. So if we remember back in October, there was a presentation about how there's this new, we go to bullet 3 on this slide, a new executive order N324 that terminated the 2 previous executive orders regarding requirement for coordination between the well permitting agencies and the groundwater sustainability agencies to determine consistency of well permit applications with a groundwater sustainability plan. So the language in those orders was actually to say that the well permitting agency needed to ensure that a well permit was not inconsistent with the groundwater sustainability plan. that requirement from the executive order has been rescinded. So there's no longer that requirement for coordination. And at the October 16th meeting, the board requested that the GSA consultant provide an overview both of the county's role in the well permitting process, so what is entailed in obtaining a well permit, and then also coordinate with how, and sorry for the multiple coordinations in this bullet, but coordinate with the county to discuss ongoing coordination. Since it's not required, how do we make that happen, either formally or informally at the agency level in the absence of the executive order? So to tackle the first part, what is the county's role in well permitting, and what does obtaining a well permit actually mean? What's the review process for that? The Department of Public Health, Environmental Health, and Drinking Water Program, that is the responsible entity at the county for regulating well construction and decommissioning. So that's going to be reviewing and approving, inspecting, permitting new wells or decommissioning wells, and those can be public or private. So if you're drilling a hole in the ground in the county of Los Angeles, these are the folks you have to talk to before you can do that. For new well construction, you're going to have to provide information to the county. So you have to provide them a written narrative of the work plan that's going to happen. It's going to have to include site-specific information on where that's occurring, any known geologic features that you might encounter, that you're trying to encounter, anything that you need to tell the county so that they understand the work that is going to happen at that location. Additionally, they have specific regulations on giving them a well diagram, right? So how deep are you going to go? What is the well construction going to look like? How big is the well going to be? What's the difference between the well casing and the borehole size? What are you going to fill that space with? How are you going to seal it? How are you going to add material to the hole? All of these kinds of very specific discussions of how you are going about constructing a well. The county needs to know and understand that. You need to provide that in your application. And then you've got to provide a scaled drawing of the site and anything that you know within 200 feet of the site. So there's just the basic information. Yeah.
That's a clarifying question.
Yeah.
So this is even within independent cities in the county. If it's
Correct.
in
If you are
Rosemead,
within-
county is issuing the permit.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
And so the county is very clear on the requirements for well construction. They have guidelines that the applicants have to follow: minimum depth and thickness of the annular seal, how you place material in that annular space, construction of the surface completion, there are guidelines for that, the process that you're going to go through for sealing wells that are screened across multiple aquifers, or the perforation type that you're allowed for each well for screens. And then on top of the county processes, in specific areas, there are additional requirements. So and there are areas where you have to get approval from the Department of Regional Planning, and there are areas where you have to get approval from a health department of an independent city, like Long Beach, Pasadena, Vernon. Those do not, to mine, I should step back for a second. I'm not sure if there are any regional planning jurisdictions within the Santa Monica subbasin, but the health department jurisdictions do not apply to the Santa Monica subbasin. There are no independent entities with additional requirements. But overall, this is to say that the approval of a well permit at the county level is limited to compliance with California well standards and county regulations. So the flip side of that is, what doesn't it include? It doesn't look at the kinds of things that we had discussed for consistency with the GSP. It doesn't look at anticipated drawdown of water levels in the well. It doesn't look at the radius of the drawdown of the well. It doesn't even ask for expected production volumes, because that's not within the county's permitting application process and requirements. So I'm going to pause there for a second. This is sort of the first part of this discussion, is what's entailed in getting a county permit. And the next part of this is update on the discussion of coordination between the GSA and the county on to these other items of notification so that the GSA is aware that there is a well permit in the Santa Monica subbasin and asking for additional information from those permit applicants. And so the quick update is that on December 3rd, which now seems like a long time ago, Director Wang, Dr. Gold, and I met with representatives of the county to discuss coordination between agencies on well permit review. So a very positive meeting. The county staff were very knowledgeable about what was going on in GSAs across the basin and were very, very helpful, really appreciated the time that they took to meet with us. And the county is working with all groundwater sustainability agencies and other responsible management entities within its jurisdiction to address these concerns and to ensure ongoing local coordination and stewardship. I think both entities agreed that the county and the Santa Monica GSA have a strong working relationship and that they both share the intent of compliance with SGMA. I'm sorry, the compliance with the intent of SGMA is their shared goal, was the message coming out of that meeting. I don't know if Director Wang has anything else to add from that, but it was a very positive meeting and I think it did a lot to ensure ongoing coordination.
How about adding like a checkbox or something in the process, right?
They are looking into adding information on the well permit application form to make sure that applicants are aware that they are within a different management entity than just the county. So they wanted to make sure that the language wasn't specific to the Santa Monica subbasin or just to GSAs, because there are a lot of different entities in the county that oversee groundwater management. But they are trying to make sure that any applicant that comes in who is looking for a well to go in the Santa Monica subbasin would be aware that there are other jurisdictional oversight into that area, and would reach out to the responsible entity, in this case, the GSA, to understand the responsibilities.
Yeah, all I have in my notes is that they mentioned their new application, which is for them to
Yeah.
contact the local water purveyor or GSA.
Yeah.
On their application process now.
Did you say local water purveyor or GSA? How about local water purveyor and GSA?
I think
They may
they're,
not be the same thing.
right, but I think it's not and, it's for them, they just want to leave it open because there's certain areas that they oversee that doesn't involve a GSA, it's more local water purveyor or special district or something.
Yeah, I think they were working on the language to ensure that it made the most sense to an applicant of who to be able to contact.
Right.
I don't think they had finalized. I didn't want to put any specific language on there because my understanding at that meeting is that they hadn't finalized any of the language yet. But they are well aware of the need for well permit applicants to reach out to other entities other than just for the physical well permit.
The only thing I have is I don't know where this resided, Dr. Weinberg, is the develop standard template for LA County to attach on our GSA review. You remember discussion of that? I think
I
they were
do
just asking
remember.
something from us, right?
That was that they were interested in finalizing their well permit application first. And then we would take the next step of integrating a template from us. And this kind of leads into the next discussion item as well, which we can talk about there. But yeah, I think we're very open to continue to work with us and get additional forms as needed.
We would submit our request for information on the volume data and drawdown scope of the drawdown.
That's correct. It would be information that's, and again, this will discuss in the next item as well, but it would be information that's similar to what we asked, what the GSA asked for of applicants when the well permitting guidelines for the GSA, separate from the county.
Comments from the directors on this item?
So we have a comment, and again, yeah, 3 minutes. For a second.
Hi, am I on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I had a question as to how this pertains to the city also, and the coordination that is ongoing with regard to wells. And does this include just new wells that are going through an application process, or does this also include wells that have been continuing withdrawal wells that we don't necessarily have information on? Because I'm wondering what is the relationship here between the county, the city, for instance, LA Sanitation, the GSA, and even EWIMP with regard to oversight on watershed. And here I'm also thinking with regard to Biona wetlands, and the water is potential drinking water and drinking water there. So does this merge with the protection there as a GDE, groundwater dependent ecosystem? Thanks.
I just would like to clarify, when you say the city, are you talking about the city of Santa Monica, the city of Los Angeles, both? Which city are you referring to?
More so with regard to the city of Los Angeles. I assume that the city of Santa Monica is certainly, because they're part of this GSA, is really looking at this. And I believe sanitation is also a part of this GSA. So I do know that with the water board, there have been requests to sanitation for well dewatering information, and sanitation has been resistant to providing any information. And so I'm just wondering, this relationship that I'm seeing on this slide, for instance, that this coordination is going well, which sounds great. I'm just wondering, how does that embrace the city of Los Angeles in sanitation, and even the EWIMP issues with regard to protecting the watershed and the potential drinking water and drinking water of Biona as a GDE. And I'm sorry, but I do bring that up in context with water board actions of Sigma that are ongoing with regard to both the Playa Vista project and Biona wetlands.
So Dr. Weinberger, this item we're discussing well permitting coordination with the county. And isn't this specifically for new wells?
This is specifically, yes, the answer, yes. This is specifically for new wells, and it does not address existing wells.
So any other coordination efforts to gather data on existing wells, the GSA would have to take that up with other agencies or other jurisdictions?
Yes.
The county oversees decommissioning wells though also, right? Based on,
Correct. They oversee decommissioning of wells. So if a well owner comes to the county and says that they are done using that well, it's exceeded its lifetime, whatever happened, then there are county requirements for sealing that well up, taking it back out of the ground, and ensuring that there's not cross contamination. So those decommissioning requirements are very similar, sort of if you think of in the reverse of the well permitting requirements, where it's specific to what material goes in the hole, how does the process happen to remove the casing, all of that kind of stuff, to make sure that the well is sealed adequately according to county standards.
Then would we also receive information on if a well is decommissioned within the basin?
That's a good question. We didn't specifically ask for that information from, the county, and we can go back and discuss that with them.
Frankly, I would be surprised that most well operators, owners would come in for decommissioning. They don't want to pay to do it. They just stop using the well. At least that's been my understanding, anecdotal understanding, I will say. I don't have any facts to back that up, but that would be my understanding. But yes, if we could get information as well, if something's decommissioned, that could be helpful to us too.
Just to add some, this is Director Wing, add some information to, Trainer Tully was saying about the decommissioning. So for example, if we were to put in a new well that's replacing an aging well, we are required to decommission and destruct that. Otherwise, we would have to do an environmental impact analysis, because essentially you're doubling the pumping if you don't destroy the existing well. So it's oftentimes where you're drilling a new well, you have to destruct the old well you're replacing. So it's pretty common in that. And then to answer one of the other, I think, public inquiry on this items, you know, I think maybe 1 or 2 meetings ago, we did also talk about potential coordination or ongoing coordination with regional board regarding the water data that they have. They're working on publishing that and making that available to the GSA. Down the road, that'll help us calibrate our model and help us better understand our basin conditions. So the regional board, that's another example of coordination with another agency, with regional board publishing their dewater data with whatever they have.
I don't have high confidence in most people behaving the way that the city of Santa Monica does, so let me just put that out there. As a hearing officer, I try and see all sides. Are there any other public comments?
We have no other public comments.
Any other discussion from the board? All right, thank you. We are receiving and filing item 7B and moving on to 7C. Ms. Weinberger, Dr. Weinberger.
Okay, so this is all, we've interjected slides in here as breakpoints in the discussion, but it really all flows from what we've been talking about this morning. We go back to the discussion from October with the split rescinding of the previous governor's executive orders. The October meeting, the board requested that we go back and take a look at excuse me, the individual well verification procedures that this agency developed in 2023 to determine whether or not there's any linkage in those well verification procedures, which were developed under the previous executive orders. And so the idea is to look and see if there's a link that remained in those well verification procedures to the executive order that has now been rescinded or terminated. So when we went back to look at those well verification procedures, there are 2 components to the procedures. One is the actual procedures themselves, which is a document that anyone who is applying a permit in the Santa Monica subbasin is asked to follow to prepare information to give to the GSA so that the GSA understands the volume of groundwater intended to be extracted, potential impacts to the sustainable management criteria under SGMA. So those well verification procedures, that document that tells applicants what they need to do, those do not reference the executive order N323. So there's no revision required to the well verification procedures themselves. However, there's also a form that was requested that is this new or replacement groundwater production well form. It's also in other places called a well permit application checklist. So we should probably clarify that, which is good review. But it was supposed to be submitted with a well permit application. So this was that formal tie between the GSA and the county, so that the county could say, yes, this applicant has talked to the GSA and the GSA has found that the application is not inconsistent, so the county could go ahead and approve the permit. So that form does, and I've highlighted the 2 spots here, it does have a discussion of the executive order and 323. So any new or replacement well that is not exempt from executive order and 323 cannot be approved by the County of Los Angeles. So that's no longer true because that order has been terminated. And then the second is that this form must be completed, signed and submitted by the property owner with each well permit application before the well can be approved by the County of Los Angeles. So again, that link is no longer a must. The county is not required to get this form before they're allowed to approve the well. So there are a couple of options with this. We can certainly we can revise the form, delete the language that refers to the executive order and that language saying that it must be submitted. That would still be a GSA requirement for the applicants to fill out the form because it provides the GSA with information. But it wouldn't change in any way the requirements of the new and replacement well procedure document that exists and is a broader look at what the GSA has asked of well permit applicants. The other option another option is to delete just the form part of it entirely because those procedures still spell out what it is that the GSA is requesting of a new permit applicant. And all of the necessary information is still described in those procedures. The form was just sort of a simplified version that could be passed on to the county. So that's it for my discussion of this, and I think the board can discuss from here, ask questions.
Thank you, Dr. Weinberger. Are there comments from any of the directors? Yes, Director Welch.
In the discussion with the county, was there further or any talk of trying to get them to require our approval prior to their potential approval of the application?
I think require is a strong word for the county. I would go back to what we said in a previous item, which is that there was a long discussion of the shared goals of the agencies and the intent to fully comply with SGMA. But I'm not an attorney, so I don't know where. I guess I would shy away from the use of the word required.
So this is this is Director Wang. I think from our conversation is that, I don't think we could put in something like you need to have this. That language, like this is required before they issue the permit. They did essentially state to the effect that, we'll direct them to work with the GSA, work that out. That's why there was a follow-up item as this evolved, that we have some kind of standard template that we'll send back to LA County on what our opinion is. So they will consider that in the permit process. That's kind of where everything stands right now. There's no like requirement or approval, anything official like that, because there's the legal side of it that it's only staff that's discussing that. I don't know, coordination of what we need.
So,
Go ahead, Director Singletary.
yeah, I was gonna ask, so the requirement for the hydrogeologic report, does county require that, or is this voluntary at this point? We can't compel somebody digging a well to do this without the state order, correct?
My understanding, and this is, again, attorneys can weigh in on this, my understanding of the authority given to the GSA under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that the GSA does have the authority to request and require new well applicants to provide you with information on an extract. You can, and this is another item, but require metering on the wells. You can require an understanding of the impact of production on the sustainable management criteria. That's my understanding is that's a GSA authority. It does not mean, I'm trying to step back. The sequence of when that report has to happen. And right now than it was under the executive order, my understanding. So under the executive order, the GSA could require all of this information in advance of having the county issue the well permit, because the GSA needed to do its due diligence to understand if it was consistent with the GSP, and then provide that information to the county so that the county could say, yes, we've been provided with the information to say it is consistent. Now we can go ahead and issue the permit. Sequencing is no longer required because the executive order was terminated. However, there is discussion ongoing with the county as to how the agencies work together on well permitting issues and understanding the impacts of issuing new permits and new production from the different areas of the county.
So maybe to help clarify or to add additional information on Director Singletary, if you look at the previous slide, the what doesn't provide in that well permitting is that the county doesn't really require like production volume, that type of information. They just permit the well for protection of public health. And then, so there's the gap of like who's managing the production side and sustainable yield stuff. That's where Sigma came about for the GSA to kind of oversee that. Because there's the other side of DDW, when you permit a well as a municipal water agency, DDW comes and inspect all the above ground equipment to make sure we're in compliance with drinking water requirements, right? So there's an agency that permits the well. There's another agency that looks at the production and protecting the above ground equipment as DDW. But there's that third agency sort of missing. That's kind of where we come in, I think, as a GSA to then look at that. And without the executive order, it's kind of left to these agencies and to figure out on our own before there was an established procedure how this went about with the executive order. We're kind of in that second spot now without the executive order. We need to figure out how to work together between all these agencies.
The DDW is a state agency.
Yeah. They're, excuse me, they're under the State Water Resource Control Board.
Director Quinn, I do recall, in the executive order, there was just, exemptions for like, if it's less than 2 acre feet and then things like that, right? So if we do proceed with keeping the form or the permit application, we would have to update all those exemptions and requirements because all those refer back to the executive order as well, right?
That's a good point. I believe the form does. The GSA certainly could review the specifics of who they would want to have to submit a hydrogeologic report for, right? So the general de minimis production is less than 2 acre feet a year. I think there were also exemptions in the executive order for public water systems. Although the city of Santa Monica did come to this board to notify them of the work that they've been doing and have followed the same procedures as others. But yeah, we could review I didn't take a look at that specifically. Yeah, good point.
Thank you. There's someone downstairs.
Oh,
Thank you. And then, follow-up question. So if we move forward with implementing this outside of, now that the executive order has been rescinded or ended, does this constitute like a discretionary action then by the GSA, and would that require, are there any CEQA implications?
I'm not the person to answer that question. I apologize. I think that's a legal question.
We'll come away from Melanie there.
Okay.
Well, is this where it ties to the specific extraction ordinances that we wanted each agency to put in place? Is that where the enforcement and the teeth are? Because if you have somebody who just is like, I'm not gonna fill this out, in county for some reason, they're not requiring this, right?
Right.
So it's,
Isn't that
Is it
the
an honor system?
ordinance? Isn't that the ordinance at the end of today's agenda that would give us the authority to do that?
Again, I'll defer to.
Okay.
it would give the individual agencies the ability, the
The
GSA.
Right now, the
We
individual.
can't, that's my understanding.
That's
yes,
correct. I
please.
think the thought, I think, is for the GSA at least to come up with that framework, and it's up to the individual cities and agencies to enforce within their jurisdiction. But, you know, it sort of needs to start with the GSA to support that rather than individual cities coming up with different things. But the choose to enforcement is up to each individual city.
So again, the ordinance at the end of today's agenda, would that provide authority for jurisdictions to require this information from applicants, from people building a well?
I believe, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me because I'm sharing my screen. I believe that most of the information in the ordinance that's required has to do with reporting on groundwater extractions. It's a little different than the hydrogeologic report that is required, that has been required by the GSA, because that also involves a look at the sustainable management criteria. So there's overlap, but they're not exactly the same.
So I would suggest that the legal effect of the ordinance you're considering, you should discuss with county council. So each individual party should discuss it with their attorney because it's a legal question.
Yeah, what was the answer? So the legal with legal. So I would support deleting the language citing executive order of N323 and then still requiring submittal of the form with a well permit application. I'm not quite sure how that happens except through our wonderful coordination, but I've come up with some more questions based on our discussion now. So first of all, what if, and I don't know if this would be the case, but what if someone comes to us before they go to the county? They don't know about public health, but they come to the GSA or the individual entities and they say, hey, we want to put in a well. Do we say, oh, well, you have to go to public health first? What is the timing on this? Does the timing really matter? Whether they go to the county first or whether they go to us? I mean, they get their permit, but really, how do these intertwine? How do these work together? Under the former executive order, it was easy. Now I'm not quite sure how that works. And then what if their production throws the basin over our sustainable yield? Then what do we do? So I've come up with some more questions just based on whether we're requesting information and when we get the information. And then will public health tell us if they've signed off on a well? So the well is complete, because I'm sure there are times when well construction begins and then maybe it's never finished. So we might get information that a well has gone in, but then maybe it doesn't get completed. Maybe it's not producing. These are technical questions, so they're not maybe as easy to answer.
Excuse me, yeah, no, I think I can take the last question, which is on what happens when an applicant goes to the county. If we think back to our first discussion item, right, there is coordination for the county to inform the GSA of new well permit applications that have been submitted. So then in that process, if a new well permit application has been submitted, either the consultant or staff or whomever can reach back out to the county to update the board that, you know, will provide the information at one board meeting. At the next board meeting, we can reach back out to the county to say, has this been completed? Is it done? what's the stage, and we can provide that information as part of your quarterly update. That's easy enough to do. I think some of the other questions you raise are board discussion questions on how to approach these things.
Is there any other discussion?
Well, I was gonna say, your questions were really good, and these are actualizing all of my questions from previous meetings and understanding where county falls into the process, and now the state order going away has further complicated it. So, yeah, I appreciate your questions.
So I'd like to reiterate my question from earlier. If we adopt these well verification procedures, does that, does that count as a discretionary action, and are there any CEQA implications? And then following up to that, so let's say an applicant applies to the county, they get their well permit, they come to the GSA, we review for GSP consistency, and we find that it's inconsistent. Does that, what's the authority that's being established where we can block that well, or that well is not, now their county permit's not valid then, or is that the authority that we have to do
That's
that?
what I was asking about the system.
Yeah,
That's
I'll
what
leave
this
the same
is about
question.
system for
I'll
you.
defer to legal on any authority questions. I do want to just clarify, today's item on the agenda is just a discussion, and these procedures were already adopted at
Correct.
a previous meeting.
The ordinance, we will not be adopting as a GSA.
The ordinance, that's a later.
That's a
item,
later
right?
item.
It is a-
This
This
is
is-
just a review of any linkages. This item is just a review of linkages to the executive order that has been terminated to the well verification procedures that were adopted in 2023 by this board.
To clarify, the procedures were adopted pursuant to the executive order. That's exactly what, you didn't do it of your own volition because you just thought there was an executive order, you adopted the procedures to comply with the executive order.
But you referenced the CEQA approval. I thought you were referring to the ordinance.
Well, no, I'm not referring to the ordinance. I'm talking about the well procedures, because we adopted them per the executive order. The executive order is gone now, so we're considering the options to deleting certain language, but keeping the well procedures. So wouldn't that basically be, we're adopting a new set of standalone procedures that are requiring applicants to go through the well verification procedures as amended, or however we want to amend it, and including the GSP consistency review that, so there's two attachments on the GSA website, right? There's the checklist, which has all the stuff, and then, the production well installation verification procedures with all the different information, company requirements, all that. So isn't that what we're kind of talking about here, is modifying these approved documents to stay beyond or am I missing something?
So just for clarification, this is an informational item, not an agenda item, but I do take your point.
So I guess I have a question on, since it is an info item, is essentially just following, do we provide direction at the end to agendize later as an action item?
Yeah. To clarify, it's agendized, it's not agendized for a vote.
Yeah,
I said it's agendized as an informational item.
Yeah, you said it's not on the agenda.
I did not say that, but thanks.
So I guess do we just finish the discussion, and then do we ask for that at the end of this item, or at the end when we're talking about agendizing new items?
So you will give direction at
At the end.
at the
Okay.
end of this item.
Right
And
now.
And we will take
Oh,
that
yeah.
direction and we can come back and agendize it as an action item, because again, it's not on the agenda as an action item, it's on the agenda as an informational item. Not on the agenda as an informational item means it's on the agenda, just not as an action item.
So when we finish this discussion, we will give direction to staff what we'd like. Again, I would support just deleting the language and
Okay.
keeping the form.
I would agree. Yeah, because we already went through the trouble of developing all that. I'm sure it'll be used again one day once we figure out all the procedural coordination between the different agencies.
Maybe.
In the meantime, it'll just live there in limbo, maybe.
So I still have that remaining question of if we change it, remove the executive order references, we adopt it as a new set, an updated set of permitting checklists and criteria. Does that, when we decide on an application, is that a discretionary action, and do we have to do CEQA for that?
It's not a project.
At least I don't think we do CEQA, I don't know if legal.
And no, I'm not a CEQA attorney.
Or
I
maybe
think
not.
you should consult a CEQA attorney. Each of you
Yeah.
should individually consult your CEQA attorney.
Even if it's CEQA is led by the individual agency, not necessarily the ESA.
Okay.
The public agency that's taking
Right.
discretionary action.
Okay.
The county's permitting is not discretionary, it's ministerial. You fill out the whole form, they give you your permit.
Right.
They don't decide, it's not a value judgment on whether they're going to give it, as long as it's filled out, they'll give it to you. So the CEQA is not required for the county.
Are we clear as mud? I feel like we're clear as mud.
So there's still.
Yeah,
No,
yes,
but
yes,
yeah, we don't,
yes.
I don't think the
Yes.
board is
Yes.
Yes,
done with their.
I think that's just a question that we asked,
Yes.
the
We need the
GSA
answer.
consultant to research them when they bring the item back.
You should discuss it with your attorney.
Right, I mean, that's part of the task when they bring the item back, to understand what that is, right?
Right.
So,
So I think all the attorneys understand that's an attorney question.
yeah, I guess the attorneys have to get together, okay.
Okay, we do have public comment. Is there any further board discussion?
All right. Thank
Okay,
you, Ms. Kern.
yes, you're welcome. Okay, Ms. McPherson, I'm going to unmute you.
And you hear me now?
We
Yep.
can hear you.
Thank you. I raise an issue of these permits for wells that have to reapply for a permit. And if that is to be included in this, because in looking at who's a part of this GSA again, I see that the city of LA is not a part of this GSA. The Department of Sanitation is not present here, which is concerning because when the Playa Vista site itself, which we're talking about the lower portion of the Santa Monica groundwater basin, they have gas mitigation systems that they are required to dewater and keep the groundwater 1 foot below the gas intake pipes. The water table at the Playa Vista site is at or near the surface. So this is each and every building out there has multiple dewatering wells that are out there. And with sanitation being reticent, and let's put it this way, they've been hostile in providing the data that they are required to record with regard to how much is withdrawn. And from a standpoint of all of this water, according to the Playa Vista EIR, is to be cleansed at the surface and put back into the ground there to recharge the underlying aquifers, which is great. It's just that there is no oversight that this is actually happening. And for that, I'm wondering what role this GSA does play. And as was said earlier, there's a broad spectrum of ask that this board can request for information. And this just seems like a giant data gap in the lower portion of the Santa Monica Basin for all of this dewatering that is ongoing. And whether it should be allowed or is it bringing in saltwater intrusion that where, it's not being addressed.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Item 7C is whether or not we will retain language in our forms requesting, requiring coordination with the Department of Public Health as per the previous executive order. And this is the second time today I've heard you say the city of LA is not on the GSA. It is. The Department of Water and Power is a City of Los Angeles agency. It's not the sanitation district, but it's certainly the city of Los Angeles. They are here. With that, is there any other discussion from the board? All right, this was also a receive and file item. Thank you very much, everyone. We're moving on to item 7D.
Item 7D is a discussion of the basin boundary modification. This also is a little bit separate from the previous discussions, but it is one that came back from the October board meeting. And this was a look at what it would take to get a basin boundary modification for this basin in general terms. So the map that's shown on the screen shows the existing DWR Bulletin 118 boundary in blue for the Santa Monica subbasin. I apologize if folks on the Zoom call can't see my cursor. Hopefully you can. But this is the basin boundary as it's currently defined in Bulletin 118. This is the basin boundary for which the groundwater sustainability plan was developed. The recharge area for this basin extends into the Santa Monica Mountains through the various watersheds. And it is outlined here in this kind of tan brown color. Development or other impacts within that area, as we've seen recently, can impact recharge to the subbasin itself. So if there's additional development of impermeable surfaces, that can cause increased runoff, which tends to reduce recharge rates. And there could be decreased subsurface recharge on the northern boundary of this subbasin. When we're talking about a DWR basin boundary modification, it's important to understand DWR's definition of what a groundwater basin is. And that definition is an aquifer or stacked series of aquifers with reasonably well-defined boundaries in a lateral direction, so extent sideways. And those boundaries are based on features that significantly impede groundwater flow. And then the other part of the definition is it should have a definable bottom to the groundwater basin. Usually that's adopted as the base of fresh water in an area. And elsewhere, it can be that there's an impermeable bottom. You've got a series of sediments on top of hard rock. Doesn't allow for much permeability. So that's the definition of a groundwater basin. And the reason that the blue boundary does not extend up into the Santa Monica Mountains currently is that DWR has traditionally defined the Santa Monica Mountains as relatively impermeable to groundwater, not a series of an aquifer or a stacked series of aquifers. So that's where that discrepancy comes in. The Santa Monica Mountains in geologic terms are hard rock, and the Santa Monica subbasin is soft rock aquifers. Agencies can change the boundaries of a groundwater basin or subbasin for scientific or jurisdictional reasons. So there has to be a logic behind the request. And DWR generally opens a submittal period for those applications. And to my understanding, they are not currently accepting applications to change basin boundaries. I have not reached out to DWR to get a sense of when that next one, the next basin boundary modification period might be. But my contacts from a little while ago suggested it wouldn't be for another year or two at least. And that is all I have on this item.
Thank you, Dr. Weinberger. Are there any questions or comments from the board
I have a,
or Singletary?
thank you. Is this county area or is it state, the additional?
It's the majority of this, I believe, is County of Los Angeles. There may be no?
No, the majority is.
Oh,
the
City of
There's
Los
a
Angeles?
small- There's a small amount.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Director Wynn?
Thank you. Are there other basins that have been modified and like substantially, like what are the benefits, I suppose? Or-
I think I will leave it to the discretion of any individual GSA to determine what's substantial. Several GSAs did apply early in the process of developing the groundwater sustainability plans for basin boundary modification. This change is outside, I think, of the scope of the changes that were requested during those initial basin boundary modification processes, and I think the reason for that is this definition of what's an aquifer. And so, I don't believe that DWR has seen a request to extend a basin boundary into areas like the Santa Monica Mountains before.
Can I ask another question? So says here, development within the area could impact recharge to the sub-basin due to increased runoff on impermeable surfaces. But the GSA doesn't have jurisdiction over development, right? So how are we tying these two things together?
Well, if I could step back for a second from that, the GSA doesn't have jurisdiction over that area at all.
Right, but even if we did, it's not like a development project come to the.
Fair enough, that's one example of an impact to recharge, right? There are other changes or modifications within that area that could impact recharge. The GSA does have authority within its jurisdiction to protect areas of known recharge, right? So elsewhere in the state where there are areas of basins that are known to be the primary recharge area, the GSA can coordinate with land permitting agencies to land use agencies to say like, hey, we can't develop in this area because we're counting on this for groundwater recharge, right?
Oh.
So I don't know that I don't know that the GSA itself says no, but there's a direct coordination there because they've defined it in their GSP and the GSP and the urban water management plans and all the other plans have to connect and then they go through CEQA and CEQA has to tie back to the GSP, all of that interconnection that again starts stepping pretty far away from my technical background, but that occurs elsewhere in the state. The challenge here is, of course, that this basin is already developed and the recharge is coming from outside. The dominant source of recharge is coming from outside the developed area of this basin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director White.
This is Director Wayne, just a question of, thank you for the presentation. I think this is just your DUDEX research at the moment of possibility, right? We haven't discussed this with DWR.
I have not reached out to DWR to discuss this, no. I believe that DWR has a representative online today, listening to so DWR is aware that this is being discussed.
And that was my concern, given this definition, whether we would be able to claim a recharge area as part of the groundwater basin. But if we're allowed a scientific or jurisdictional argument, perhaps there's a way to make this a jurisdictional argument, because again, if this is one of our primary, if not the primary recharge area for the basin, why wouldn't we be able to, and this is a rhetorical question, why wouldn't we be able to argue that that's an important part of the basin? Again, rhetorical.
Okay.
Yeah. I think perhaps the direction for this as a follow-up then is for them to begin reaching out to DETA or have that discussion ahead of the submittal period when it opens, I guess, whenever that is. I don't think I see a date.
I don't know what the date for the next period. So that is another item I should research.
Oh, all right. Oh, I didn't hear it. I didn't catch it, but thank you.
You know, stop signing your Christmas cards every
I'm trying to get an early start this year.
Is there any other discussion from the board?
There is no public comment.
All right, thank you very much. That is a receive and file item. We're moving on to item 7E, the cost sharing.
Sorry, I'm just writing a note to
Please.
myself about the last direction.
Please, that's fine.
Sure, we'll feed them at the end for you.
No, we won't. We won't remember.
That's what I'm signing away here. That's the only thing. I'm
Okay.
signing.
So moving on to cost sharing, the first portion of this is actually a member agency report back on the status of the MOU for administrative costs. So I will leave that to board and member agencies.
Well, I'll start off. The county again is still fine with paying our 20%.
DDP still fine with our 20%.
Beverly Hills, City Council approved the MOU and it was signed and I believe sent back to the other agencies.
Right, this is Tilden Kim, counsel for Beverly Hills. The city of Beverly Hills has signed that finalized cost sharing agreement. We sent the executed copy to San Marcos City Attorney. We're just waiting for return of all of the executed signature pages.
That means the 2% for Beverly Hills?
That is-
Thank you.
Culver City Council also approved the cost share. I'm not sure. Hopefully we signed the agreement, but if not, we're able to.
Because we'll pay the balance is what's left. This is Santa Monica.
Okay,
Literally left holding the bag. All right, and then there was a report on implementation cost sharing examples from other GSA.
that's right. So there was a request at the October meeting to research and review other ways that implementation costs have been shared by GSAs in the state. And and again, I'm not the lawyer here, so I'm gonna tell you what I've read, and the actual legal implications of that I will leave to the lawyers. But there are a number of GSAs that have adopted regulatory fees that you have to actually go through a fee study and have a resolution to adopt these for implementation cost sharing. And so just listed here are a couple of examples of what that looks like in these GSAs. Santa Rosa Plain GSA, calculate annually the revenue required to run the GSA, and they divide that by the number of acre feet extracted, and they apply that cost to the pumpers, right? So it however much you pump, you pay per acre foot of pumping. And that's an annual calculation. I believe all of these are assessed annually under this program. Salinas Valley Basin GSA has a different way of distributing costs, looking at number of connections for municipal users and number of irrigated acres for agricultural landowners. Again, changes annually with budget. Another GSA, this is the Kings River East GSA. They base it on the contribution of groundwater pumping to overdraft. So they're in a different situation where they're actually still in overdraft. So they say, well, how much have you contributed to overdraft? That's how much you're gonna pay. Ukiah looks at users based on groundwater usage. You get charged for gallons extracted, acres of irrigated land, or property parcel fees, depending on what group you're in. So they can go from the simplest of here's how much gets pumped, we're gonna divide that by the cost, and this is cost per acre foot, to a relatively complex system of regulatory fees. But all of this is determined in the regulatory fee study of how to go about. The regulatory fee study provides options for a GSA board to consider, and the GSA board then develops the resolution based on that fee study. Additionally, again, not a lawyer here, but you can do a different kind of fee, the property fee from a Proposition 218 election. This has been the case for several of the GSAs in the Central Valley, where it's a flat fee per acre on the extraction of groundwater. Those are generally agricultural areas where acreage is connected to groundwater usage. And I believe that's it for the cost sharing options that other GSAs have adopted.
Thank you, Dr. Weinberger. Is there any discussion from the board? I'm not sure how we move forward on this. Any suggestions from our consultants?
Well, I guess before we ask a question, I'll just make a comment at the beginning. It seems like all these fees are developed to implement the GSP, right? That they're trying to recover revenue, whether it's monitoring wells or other sustainable management that's identified with GSP. So I understand that this is how they're collecting the money, for lack of better words, to pay for those projects, right? You know, we just agreed upon cost sharing for administrative costs. Right now, the city of Santa Monica is taking on the burden for essentially the implementation costs. So, I mean, obviously, we have our primary interest as we extract groundwater as our primary source of drinking water for our city here. So it's in our best interest to maintain compliance with the GSP and implement those projects. But, you know, going forward, the fast forward a couple items, I think later on, or maybe it's the next item about well extraction, sustainable management. You know, usually that's borne by the pumpers, right? So part of the establishing the metering ordinance, requiring that, it just help us establish that down the road, right? The city has no problem paying for that, but other pumpers in the basin should be paying their fair share as well, to manage the basin sustainably. That's just my comment and our opinion on the matter.
How do we figure out what that cost would be?
For me, I think ours is, you know, getting those rules put in place, like the extraction metering, right, to have that start as a basic start in terms of cost sharing. That's the down the road on. To me, the easiest thing is like what you do in rates, right? You have a set of project administrative costs. In this case, it would be just the projects. You have those projects identified in the GSP. You have a cost limit to those, and you divide amongst the people that are pumping based on their volume being extracted. That'll still come back to us paying for most of it anyway. But every little bit outside assistance would help from other pumpers.
So if you want to go back to slide 21, maybe, and just look again at the different options that each of the GSAs have availed themselves of. There's annual calculations, there's assessment on service connections, pumping overdraft, groundwater usage and fees based on gallons extracted. So there are a number of tools you could use.
But number one seems like it might be metering.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's get the information.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to apply any of this unless you know how much each agency or each entity is extracting.
Any other comments from the board? Thank you. It's great. Do we have?
We don't have any public, well, now we have public comment. So Ms. McPherson.
Hi, thank you again. Ms. Natoli, thank you for bringing up the Department of Water and Power, and we have been in touch with requests to them regarding the Playa Vista area. However, I just want to bring it to your attention that Baiona is a groundwater dependent ecosystem. So we're also talking about the freshwater availability to Baiona itself. And just to let you know, I don't know if John is there or not, or Jesus, but
Ms. McPherson, I'm sorry, this is a discussion about implementation costs and.
yes, and that's what I'm trying to discuss is the fact that the city of LA, as far as sharing any of that, so much of this water that is being pumped is city of LA and sanitation. And they are not a part of DWP. So it just seems like a big gap to me here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any other
We
speakers?
do not.
Right, very well. This is a receive and file item. We're moving on to item 7F.
This, I believe is the last discussion item, informational item, is looking at different, oh, there's one more. All
Yeah,
right, I'm
G.
wrong. Sorry. Second to last, discussion item is on the governance structures of the GSA. And again, this is looking at options that have been adopted across the state. And so with this, just a review of other GSAs. There are 356 total GSAs in California, but many of these are single agency GSAs. So many of them don't go through the process of trying to merge their governance together when they come together as a single GSA. So there are basically really kind of two different processes by which GSAs have gotten together. There are 3 listed here, but the third one is pretty similar to the second one. So you can do a joint powers agreement, and that is not what this agency has opted to do. That agreement typically defines cost sharing and coordination, and it typically has a separate governance board and shared staff just for the JPA itself. Or there's the option to do a memorandum of agreement, memorandum of understanding, typically not shared governance or staff, and it's a less centralized approach. And that third option is a cooperation or participation agreement, which is very similar to the second option. Again, I will not weigh in on the legal bits of this, but this is sort of the general understanding of these different governance processes. And just a review of what's out there, when we look at specifically the GSAs in critically overdrafted basins, they were the first GSAs to have to form because they had to submit their groundwater sustainability plans 2 years before everybody else. 19 of those are governed by JPAs. Sorry, there are 24 GSAs in critically overdrafted. Let me rephrase that. There are 24 critically overdrafted basins. There are 19 GSAs within those 24 basins that are governed by JPAs. There are 3 that are governed by an MOU or an MOA, and 2 governed by a coordination agreement. And then there are a number of single entity GSAs that are also in those basins. I believe Ms. Supinger also looked into this on a statewide level. If you go beyond just the critically overdrafted basins, JPAs are not all that common outside of the critically overdrafted basins. But again, it's hard to sort through the data given the number of single agency GSAs that are out there. So this is just an overview of options and what others have looked into and adopted.
Thank you, Dr. Weinberger. Are there comments from the board?
I have a question. Of the single agency GSAs, are any of those multiple single agency GSAs within one basin?
Yes, you can have multiple GSAs in a single basin, and you can have, so the way that works is that they all have to either coordinate to prepare a single groundwater sustainability plan, or they prepare individual groundwater sustainability plans that have to integrate with each other. So there are detailed coordination agreements that happen in those basins.
So just a follow-up question that, so it's, I guess I'm imagining as like a basin divided into sub-basin, those sub-basins are managed by individual agencies that then they coordinate to have a GSP for the overall basin? Is that?
Yeah, there are multiple options. It can be divided into sub-basins based on hydrogeologic concerns. It can be jurisdictional. And so in other areas of the state, agencies would just have prepared a GSP for their jurisdiction, and they've coordinated with the adjoining GSAs. And those GSAs are all in a single defined DWR basin.
Thank you.
My question to my fellow directors is, do you think our structure needs to change? Are you satisfied with how this is going? Because I'm wondering, am I the only one who sees the need for a change in our structure?
I guess I'll start. I'll just, this is Director Wang from Santa Monica. I think for us, our best interest is, like I mentioned earlier, is to move forward with implementation of GSP. You know, the trouble that I see with our current setup is that it takes a lot of time and discussion and going back and forth to make decisions. Obviously, there's a lot to be considered. There's a lot of legal that have to weigh in with the 5 attorneys that have to come to agreement on that as well. That just takes the process much longer, right? If you just look at the cost shared MOU, it's been, what, 2 years?
2 years.
To get that done, right? We're looking at meter and extraction. I'm just the opinion we're behind other GSA implementing stuff to actually protect our basin. Right, aside from projects that the city is able to control, you know, if we're looking at monitoring wells in the near future, we need partnership and coordination with LA County and probably City of LA, depending on where that monitoring well needs to be located. Depending on where the monitoring well is sited, right, there's data gathering that we need from other private pumpers in the area. There are just a lot of things that should have been done or moved forward on that, just taking a long time for us to do that here with how we're currently set up. So that's just my opinion on our GSA governance structure as it currently stands.
And this is a discussion item, it's an informational item, this is a receive and file and discussion, so I would ask our other directors to have some conversations with your agencies. And let's try and figure out what to do moving forward. I agree with Vice Chair Wang that things are taking too long. We're not as efficient and effective as we could be. And I think a JPA could really help us do that. So maybe have some conversations with your folks and come back next time and let's discuss this again and see if we have any firm thoughts from the other agencies about this governance. Yes, Director Welch.
So we have talked about this because it was brought up in the last meeting and this was agendized and our city council has provided direction that supported the MOA. So we have had those discussions. That's the direction we've given.
This is Director Singletary. I guess I would have a question about legally forming a JPA. Are there requirements as to who would be the representatives and their estimates for costs? Is there any additional info that you all could bring us, or is a lot of that dependent on how the JPA would be formed?
I would say, I think a lot of the discussion of actually forming JPA should be thrown back to the attorneys. That's not my area of expertise.
I can tell you from my experience with the other GSA that I sit on, the other board that I sit on, which is a JPA. The discussions we're having now here in Santa Monica are the same we had there, as far as cost sharing, implementation costs. It was negotiated, it was figured out, it was just put into the JPA. It wasn't a separate item that we had to go back and do. As far as specific representatives, there were no names, there's individual names, but the different agencies are listed as members of the JPA.
This, would obviously be a council level decision for all of us. So yeah, we would need additional information, probably to have that discussion with our councils.
What specifically would they need?
They would definitely want to know costs, structure. I don't really know. I believe Culver City is a member of 2 JPAs. I'm not personally affiliated with them. But yeah, that wouldn't be something I could vote on here. Yeah, we're going to make a JPA. But in order to present that to my council, we would, need to flesh it out more. And I'm fine with that conversation.
Well, we have a list of costs, at least for administrative costs, and we already have a breakdown of the cost sharing. So that's been taken care of. Those administrative costs, whatever council, and the other GSA I sit on, there's a GSA, there's an attorney who's specifically counsel to the GSA, and that is part of the administrative cost.
So wouldn't the cost go up then? Because if we're having a separate governance board and shared staff dedicated to a JPA, wouldn't the administrative costs be increasing?
It might, I don't know how much would be our consultant time that's already accounted for an attorney cost, so it's foreseeable it could go up if we have to add a counsel. I don't know how much. You know, the county pays $20,000 a year for the other JPA, and there are 7 entities on board. Actually, in reality, there are 6 entities on board.
Just a comment, I would imagine the cost will go up, right? You have the GSA consultants, cost, administrative costs that we know that's split. We would need outsourcing from dedicated JPAs, so it's not, the 5 legal consortium that's always meeting on this, and it probably also staff time, right? Individual, there's probably staff assigned as well, that's currently cost not covered in that administrative cost. So I would imagine the administrative cost will go up for that. I'm just curious, Director Natoli mentioned the other JPAs, how is the cost share? Is it split evenly? Is it split kind of different percentages based on, you know, land area, pumping, whatever? How's that? I'm curious how that's split the other JPAs are involved in.
It's just split evenly. Yeah, it was okay, divide it by. There was, in the beginning, the primary water purveyor, the primary water agency in the basin estimated what the cost would be, and those costs were estimated based on how long, the cost for developing the GSP, and then knowing that the cost would go down after the GSP was adopted. So we didn't start paying a share, we didn't start sharing cost until after the first couple of years. And there was an estimate as to what the cost would be for staff time, for board meetings and things like that. And since there is really one agency, one water agency there, like pretty much here, there's one agency that's the pumper, the water purveyor. Most of the implementation costs go to our primary agency, our water agency there, that's the primary pumper. But the GSA board supports the application for grants, etc. And they've been very successful in getting grants from DWR. Or I should say we. I put on my other hat, my other GSA hat, we've been pretty successful in getting grants.
I'm assuming DWR is, doesn't have a preference as to how we're formed, it wouldn't be,
They're agnostic.
would not need their approval.
I do think a change in structure needs to be noticed appropriately to DWR, and then that would also entail an amendment to the GSP to report on the change structure of the governance of the GSA.
I agree with that. I think generally though, because it is local control, it's up to the local entities to find what governance structure is most appropriate.
Okay. I guess we're in the same place we were.
We do have public comments.
I was just gonna ask if there's any more discussion by the board, and could you call our first speaker?
So our speaker is Patricia McPherson. Ms. McPherson, I would just remind you to ensure that the comments are germane to agenda item 7E, which is GSA government structure.
7F.
7F, thank you for the correction.
So, sorry, it's no problem on the slide.
Oh, 7E.
No, sorry.
Anyhow, please ensure that comments are related to the agenda item GSA governance structures. You may continue.
I haven't started. Now I will start if you can hear me. Patricia
We can hear
McPherson,
you.
Patricia McPherson, Grassroots Coalition. I believe all the comments that have been made have been germane to the items. With regard to this, as you know, we have provided information and writing to DWR and this group with regard to the fact that we believe it needs to be governed by a JPA and at the very least a memorandum of agreement, because this is a group that needs to have a legally binding standing. And from what we've researched and dealt with DWR, and who also is not the watchdog on this per se, as far as being, the whiplash as to making everyone abide by specific things, but certainly the outcomes are showing. And so as an organization, Grassroots Coalition, and others that are not present today that have been here, would very much appreciate governance structures being the JPA and at the very least an MOA. And thank you for the numbers here that we see as to who's doing what where. And I cannot tell you how much we would appreciate you doing that, because it would help clear up even doing Public Record Act requests, who to go to, who's in charge of what, and everything that we've written to you already. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Do we have any other comments?
We do not.
All right, I will repeat that 5 agencies and the State Department of Water Resources believe that the Santa Monica Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency is lawfully formed. And an MOA is similar to an MOU, which is what we're operating under now. And our last informational item, item 7G. Is that Dr. Weinberger?
It is, I should have pulled up the ordinance itself, but this item 7G is a review of groundwater extraction ordinances continued from the October 16th meeting. And the background here is that there was a discussion at that meeting of reviewing and approving as to form a draft ordinance requiring the registration, metering, and reporting of groundwater extractions within the Santa Monica subbasin. This item was continued to the January 25th, the January 2025 meeting, which then meant that it was continued to this meeting, pending revision to language in section 6 of the draft ordinance, and a discussion of the number of groundwater extractors and groundwater extraction wells in the subbasin. So the revised language was included in the board packet, the revised language to section 6 of the ordinance should be in your board packet, which was also posted online. And it changed the discussion of groundwater extraction reporting so that it now reads, unless otherwise specified by the GSA Board of Directors, the owner or operator of the extraction facility shall report daily metered extraction volumes electronically to the GSA for the period October 1 through March 31st, and for the period April 1 through September 30th, each year. So water year was stricken and changed to year, just for clarity. And then an addition of the reporting time period. So daily metered extractions was added to section 6. So that's the language change. And then the number of groundwater extraction wells are not on the map. I apologize. There is no map. We just have text on that, which is that there are 12 municipal supply wells and at least 9 private wells associated with 7 golf courses and the Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery Basin. So those are the number of known extraction wells from the groundwater aquifers in the subbasin. These are separate from passive wells that are passive dewatering wells elsewhere in the basin. So this is active groundwater extraction wells that we're discussing here.
Thank you, Dr. Weinberger. Are there any comments from the directors? All of my comments were incorporated into the revised draft, Director Welch.
So after further review of our municipal code, we were thinking that we technically have the authority already in place, that we would not have to adopt a separate ordinance.
That's
Well, just-
helpful.
Yeah, and I'll just supplement Director Welch. Yeah, so we did review the ordinances and codes in the Beverly Hills municipal code, and it's municipal code 9-4-601. It's the water supply ordinance, and it's fairly robust in terms of requirements for groundwater well reporting and permitting. And then under our general ordinance and municipal code, we do have general police powers, to enforce any violations of any provisions of municipal code. So we already have a lot of that in place. So, when the model ordinance is adopted by the GSA, then, and finalized, then we can pun intended, drill down and look at whatever needs to be supplemented, if any, on the city side to make it consistent with the model ordinance.
Fortunate. Anything else? All right, so it looks like we have agreement.
Because we agendize this for next, to take action, right? With 7G.
I
Right
think
now,
we-
just info.
Well, it's an informational item.
Yeah. I think that's right. And so hopefully all councils county councils or city attorneys will take this through their councils. Maybe we can have it all wrapped up at our next board meeting.
Do you want to restate the request to your fellow?
Well, I think the,
I can't speak English.
I think just to, borrow legal from Beverly Hills words, this is a model ordinance, right, for the other cities and agencies here to adopt or enforce as they choose, right? But this is the GSA's proposed model ordinance.
Which we would have to. Wouldn't we still have to approve it?
We do as a GSA, yeah, but I think maybe I misunderstood your previous comment of going back to our city councils before coming back. I don't think that's
No,
necessary.
it's not essential, but it might be helpful because there can always be last minute changes.
Well, if I may, my understanding is once the GSA approves this model ordinance, it's up to every agency that's part of the GSA to modify or adopt as necessary to reflect, their own ordinances, right? So like with Beverly Hills, if their existing ordinances already cover everything and maybe they need a supplement, they will. And similarly, we'll look at a city village side.
Yeah, so I think it was the other way around. It's like we would adopt this as the GSA and then each agency then decide if they want to enforce and what they need supplement, because we're all a little different. For example, we ban all private wells in our city in our ordinance. So there is actually no meter requirement needed because we banned all private wells.
Sounds good.
So the way it's currently written, it would say, an ordinance of insert member agency name. I wouldn't be able to vote on that as a member of this board.
So to clarify, like this, for example, like going back, this is just a model ordinance that if you choose to adopt or not. So if you were to say Santa Monica were to take this, that's what we would enter in our name. We choose to adopt that for Santa Monica and use this.
So there's no adoption, the GSA is not adopting this, I thought that's clear.
The GSA
It's
is
adopting the model ordinance.
adopting, like, we as a GSA approve of this as a general form, if you want to use a template, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Is
Like-
that necessary? That's not.
I think we should as a GSA to
Okay.
require metering, right, to encourage our member agencies to do the same, like Beverly Hills already have stuff in place to enforce that, so they'll just need to make any adjustments if needed. right? Like Santa Monica, I don't think we need to make any adjustments, but it's if you didn't have anything, this is a good starting point as the GSA encouraging MMAs to move forward with something similar to that.
So we do need to agendize this as an action item at our next meeting.
Yes.
Right, and do we have any public comment on this
We
item?
do, yes. Okay, Ms. McPherson?
Hi, Patricia McPherson, again, Grassroots Coalition. I am glad for an ordinance requiring the registration, metering, and reporting of groundwater extractions within the Santa Monica subbasin. And I just want to draw attention to the fact that this cites that there are 12 active municipal supply wells and then the golf courses in Holy Cross. It does not mention the Playa Vista site at all. The site is an active site for dewatering, including even for the decontamination, but also for the CDFW stream bed agreement for pumping certain amounts of water into the freshwater marsh system, which then is just thrown out into the ocean. All of this needs to be included for review of both the Playa Vista site as well as for Bional wetlands as a groundwater dependent ecosystem. So again, I'm just drawing your attention to what appears to be just a gap, and even in discussing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. And I believe we've had discussions in the past about whether or not to include the Playa Vista dewatering wells, and we are not including the Playa Vista dewatering wells. Okay, with that, we're moving on to our action items under item 8A, election of new chair and vice chair.
I have nothing to add.
Well, to continue as items the next meeting.
If you could remind us for the rotation schedule, who on the rotation schedule, which agency on the rotation schedule would be slated to take chair and vice chair?
I apologize, I don't have that at my fingertips. I think Ms. Brady is gonna hold that up.
I think that would be a foreseeable question.
Correct.
Yes.
I think I'm slated to be the chair since I'm kind of vice chair. You know.
Yeah, I think it is the
I
vice
just don't-
chair
I
and
forgot who's behind. I think it might be LA.
If you could double check on that so
Yeah.
we can ask our members.
I'm gonna have to dig deep in our files here. I don't have the.
All right, so we will hold this item and move on to item 8B. And I will ask Ms. Gray to keep digging in while we move to item 8B, which is a request for board support for coordination between the city of Santa Monica and the U.S. Geological Survey on site selection and funding for a new dedicated monitoring well in the Santa Monica subbasin. Do you have a report on this, Dr. Weinberger?
Two on this one. At the October meeting, the board provided direction for the GSA consultant to work with the US Geological Survey to determine optimal locations for monitoring wells. So if you recall, in the groundwater sustainability plan, we had identified a location close to the, I apologize to those on the call. I'm not sure why my screen just pulled down there. But we had identified location close to the coast in the Marina Del Rey area as a potential site for a monitoring well, but since the GSP was prepared, the USGS has done additional work to investigate the subbasin. They've taken some subsurface images of the basin that are new, and they've begun to do their interpretation of those images as far as looking at connections, potential connections between the groundwater aquifers in the subbasin and the ocean with regards to seawater intrusion. So Director Wang, Dr. Gold, and I met with USGS staff to discuss recommended locations for additional monitoring wells, plural, to fill data gaps that were identified in the GSP. The idea would be to start with one and build out from there, but I think the long-term goal would be to have 3 new dedicated monitoring wells in the subbasin to assist with identifying seawater intrusion, whether or not it's happening, and certainly having an early warning system if it does begin to happen. So to that end, the USGS did identify 3 different areas within the subbasin that would benefit from additional monitoring and provide an improved monitoring network for this agency and for others to be able to manage the groundwater resources of the subbasin. But in order to even begin to prioritize and select the sites, there's a lot of just basic boots on the ground work that has to get done to identify potential sites, start to go through the understanding of what land acquisition would look like, what well construction might be useful at those sites, maintenance, all of that kind of stuff has to be understood before you just go point to a spot on the ground and say, drill here. So the recommendation here is general, but it's to provide board support for additional coordination with the USGS to make sure the board is aware that that coordination is going on and approves of that coordination, to go ahead and start identifying and prioritizing potential monitoring sites that, again, will lead eventually to an improved monitoring network and an improved ability for the board to manage groundwater of the subbasin.
And does this support need to be written? Can it be verbal?
My understanding is that the board can agree with this item today formally, and that is sufficient to have informed the board of this coordination and carry on with it. We can certainly bring back items on future agendas anytime, additional work has been done, and keep the board up to date on what that work is.
So go forth and coordinate.
Effectively, that is the request. Yes.
Is there any discussion by the board?
Just a comment, I think the item is coming to the board for support just because it's coordination needed between, I think, agencies as well as working with USGS, I think, to be aware of that, or else, obviously individual agencies can go out and install monitoring well as well. But I think the support is to work with USGS and identify that location, as there's benefits to a broader regional model that USGS is responsible for.
Any other comments? Do we have any public comment, Ms. Gray?
We do not have any public comment on this.
All right, so I would entertain a motion for supporting this coordination.
Motion to support. Seconded.
Ms. Gray, could you take the roll?
Yes. Director Welch,
Yes.
Director Nguyen,
Yes.
Director Singletary,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wang,
Yes.
Chair Natoli.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving to item 8A, have you found the document?
Ms. Sukucher has found the document. So the order from the April board meeting of 2024 is first the city of Culver City, then the city of, the city of Los Angeles, Department of Water and Power, city of Beverly Hills, city of Santa Monica, and county of Los Angeles as spot 5.
So then the rotation would be Santa Monica then becomes chair and then Culver City would be?
Correct, and of course, there is an opportunity to decline
Yes.
chair and vice chair.
We would decline.
And then comes the city of Los
City of Los
Angeles.
Angeles.
I accept.
Yay.
Welcome to the party, John.
Then our vote would be, the motion is to approve the city of Santa Monica as chair for 2025 and the city of Los Angeles as vice chair for 2025. I've made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Gray, would you call the roll?
Is there public comment on this?
Oh, yeah, there should be, or I should allow it.
There is no
Thank
public
you,
comment
thank you.
on this.
Got to keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Director Welch,
Yes.
Director Wynn,
Yes.
Director Singletary,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wang,
Yes.
Chair Jolie.
Aye. Which means items 9 and 10 are yours, Chair Wang.
All right. Item 9. I was like, solicitation of items to be discussed at the next regular board meeting. Could I just recap of the things that we want to agendize from the discussions we had today on the info items?
That might be helpful.
Yeah, so I think what I have in my notes is for item 7C. To come back to the board, to take action. 7D to come back and take action as well. Essentially, that's to direct the GSA consultant to, contact DWR to discuss the possibility of modifying the basin boundary. That's item 7D. And item 7E. I don't know if there's anything on that. Come back. And then item 7G to agendize for action at the next board meeting. So I think that's 7D and G.
7C, 7D, 7G.
That's what I have.
Yes.
This thing.
Do we need to keep agendizing as an informational item? Cost that GSA governance structure,
That's 7E, right?
that's,
That's
That's
Internal
I
slides.
got thrown off by the slide.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
7F.
I don't know. I don't know if there's any point.
Well,
I feel like we need to keep talking about.
Well, I have a, this might be a legal question, but as a board, are we able to form subcommittees to discuss some of these issues? Like the cost share or the JPA, to hammer them out between meetings to bring back to the board?
I think there has to be 2 or fewer, because 3 would be a quorum, which means there needs to be a Brown Act meeting. So I think if there, but we can create a subcommittee unless
We don't, and
Councilor Cola says no. But it has to be 2 only. That's my understanding.
yeah, just throwing it out there, but I know some of these issues, I agree, do take a considerable amount of time to discuss with the whole board. And I don't know if that's allowable, if that would make us able to move a little quicker on some.
I think today we've been relying on, I think, BJUC's legal staff to kind of coordinate that. So that's probably more work on the legal team, but that's how, some of these things were discussed and they'll actually work with legal.
But I think Director Singletary brings up a good point that the attorneys can discuss, but then that needs to be discussed with either city council or their representative on this board. So maybe representatives from this board should be talking directly. And at this point, would it hurt
To form subcommittee?
to have a subcommittee? So at least
And
a
it could,
couple of board members are involved in discussing this and moving it forward and being aware of what's going on.
and it could, I would assume it would be public, but, I understand what you're saying about the quorum. Typically council subcommittees are, public facing groups, so the public can still comment on the discussions they're having. Just something to, if we're bridging a gap between a MOA and a eventual JPA, that I'm assuming that's going to be a detailed discussion, and there's a lot of elements that DUDAC probably can't provide because they're
Engineers and not.
vaguely
attorneys.
political, yeah. So just throwing that out there.
Well, then could we have an item on our next agenda about forming a subcommittee? And that probably needs to be an agendized item.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to have a discussion about an ad hoc subcommittee as opposed to a standing subcommittee, because there's different requirements?
Yeah, ad hoc, I think would make more sense, because then
Yes.
if an issue comes up, if our bylaws allow that, or do we need to alter the bylaws? Yeah, if we could maybe have a discussion about it.
Okay.
It just seems like it could be more nimble if it's not a Brown Act.
That would be the case for an ad hoc subcommittee. It's not a Brown Act requirement,
Even if there are,
if it's a standing subcommittee.
even if it's only, even if it's 3 members or 2 members?
Well, I'll let
Because 3
legal
members-
answer that question.
okay, because 3 members is quorum.
Well, I think if it's three, then it's a public.
Then, well, it's
Meetings, right.
quorum.
Right,
which
it's
means
quorum.
you need for a meeting.
But we have attorneys in the room. I'm sure they'd be happy to opine.
I think technically for Brown Act, it's Susan Cola who's supposed to opine on those. I think that's the way the bylaws are set up.
Then let's just have the information provided at our next meeting about how to do it. Or what the different structures are, what it would require.
Any other items? Discussion? Is that? Okay, that's why it's in the middle. We got a public comment on the gavel.
We do have public comment.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. McPherson?
Hi, Patricia McPherson again. Can you hear me?
We can.
Grassroots Coalition. I had a question initially that before we go, I'd appreciate response as to who is in attendance at this meeting, but also if the transcript will identify who the speakers are for the transcript. But also, Ms. Natoli, you said that there was discussion that approved not including the dewatering of the Playa Vista site. I believe I've been to all of these meetings, and certainly watched them all. I am not aware of any approval. If you could let me know what meeting, when and what was the discussion that approved not including all of the dewatering of the Playa Vista site, I would appreciate it.
I would ask staff to go through the minutes of our previous meeting. I'm not sure that the minutes are going to say, or the transcripts are going to say specifically whether or not we include the dewatering wells, but I know there have been discussions.
We can look through the meeting minutes and we can review the recorded meetings as well.
Very well, thank you.
That's not an answer.
The answer is that we need to find the answer. And I've just directed staff to find the answer.
Thank you. So your position is that this group is not going to be including the Playa Vista site's dewatering. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
I think we have to go back and probably visit, even what was discussed at that meeting with the meeting minutes.
Do you mean that we're not including the dewatering wells in our monitoring well draft ordinance?
Yes.
Is that- Well, so I don't believe they're included now, so that's the answer now. Well, your question was, when did we decide not to include those dewatering wells? And so we're going back to find when we discussed the dewatering wells.
Well, yes, I would appreciate it because the last we heard from you was that you were surprised how much dewatering was ongoing through the dewatering wells at the Playa Vista site. And we have certainly brought forward to you a lot of information with regard to all of the ongoing dewatering there. So why would it not be included?
We will have an answer for you at hopefully at our next meeting, Ms. McPherson. Because we need to get information for you. Thank you very much.
We also have a comment from Ms. Jeanette Osberg. We will need to unmute Ms. Osberg.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, I would just like to mention that I've listened to this entire meeting. And it seems that the majority of the time it's been one person passing a hot potato to another person, but not much effort to actually take action. Now, somebody said that there was going to be an action item next time on this issue of the JPA and the MOU, that it would be taking final action on how this would be handled. Is that true?
There is no action agendized for that. That was not one of the items agendized. That was for further discussion. Or that was an information item presented today.
Are we going to be here 6 years from now listening to people pass the hot potato to another person, or are we actually going to see action on a JPA, MOU, or something of that sort? I understood from all of this discussion, and I've been here from the beginning, that you are actually moving toward having an action item on the next agenda to deal with the JPA, MOU, or something of that sort. And I'd like to see a commitment to that, because I have listened to these meetings ad nauseum. And what I see is a lot of people who are massaging themselves, but not really seriously trying to come to a conclusion about this basin. Now, the Bional wetlands is a groundwater dependent basin. I believe that has
There's
been
45
agreed
seconds
upon.
left. Ms. Fosberg, there's 45 seconds left. If you could please keep your comments germane to the
Okay,
agenda item.
answer
which-
my question. Are you, as was said in this transcript, going to agendize this item for action at the next meeting? That's my question.
I believe I already answered that question in the beginning.
And just to be clear, the GSA is organized under a memorandum of agreement, an MOA. So that has already been submitted to the Department of Water Resources.
Can we see that?
It's on DWR's website. Your time has expired. Thank you.
Is that the last of the?
That is the
comments?
last of the public comments.
All right. Nothing else. I'll adjourn the meeting at
11:02.
11:02, February 19th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.